The grand hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Leaders from across the galaxy gathered, each representing their own species, their own empire. They sat at an enormous round table, their faces cold and calculating. In the center, a hologram flickered, displaying the peace agreement that had taken centuries to draft. For years, the Galactic Council had worked to bring all species together under one set of rules. These rules were meant to maintain peace, ensure fair resource distribution, and prevent war. Most species, including the humans, had accepted the terms without question, as they were seen as nothing more than pawns in a game of galactic politics. But today was different. Today, humanity was not playing the part of a silent observer. Today, Earth would stand for something new. The human representative, Ambassador Nathan Caldwell, stood at the front of the room. He was a seasoned diplomat, known for his calm demeanor and years of experience. He had dealt with countless alien species, always finding a way to agree, always seeking compromise. But today the look in his eyes was different. He had something important to say. "We, the people of Earth, cannot accept these terms," Caldwell said, his voice steady but firm. The room grew tense and whispers echoed through the council chamber. The galactic leaders turned their attention to him, some with confusion, others with disbelief. "What do you mean, Ambassador?" asked President Arkin, a towering figure from the Eterian race, his skin a deep shade of green. He was the leader of the largest faction in the galaxy and had long considered the peace agreement to be a mere formality. "You have no choice but to comply. The council has already decided." Caldwell's expression didn't change. "Earth will not be treated as a second-class member of this council any longer," he said. "We have complied with your demands for long enough. Now, it's our turn to set the terms." A murmur spread across the room as the other leaders exchanged nervous glances. The thought of humanity standing up against the council was unheard of. Humanity was still a relatively young race, having only recently achieved interstellar travel. Many saw them as primitive, unworthy of challenging the established order. But the humans had grown strong. Their technology had advanced rapidly, and their military power had become something to be reckoned with. President Arkin's voice broke the silence. "You will regret this, Caldwell. The Galactic Council will not tolerate insubordination." Caldwell met his gaze unflinching. "Then so be it," he said. "But we will no longer follow blindly. We will make our own path." The room fell into stunned silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. The leaders of the other species were trying to process what they had just heard. This wasn't just a disagreement over terms. This was a challenge to the very foundation of the council. Humanity wasn't asking for change, they were demanding it. Ambassador Caldwell stepped back, signaling to the rest of the human delegation. He had made his point. Now it was time to act. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the chamber. The human delegates followed him, their faces determined, resolute. They were not going to beg for peace. They were not going to beg for respect. Today, humanity was standing on its own. As the humans exited the chamber, the murmurs in the room grew louder. Some leaders looked at each other in disbelief, others in anger. The human delegation had just walked away from a negotiation that could change the course of the galaxy. "What now?" one of the Zorkian delegates asked, his voice laced with tension. "Are we going to allow this rebellion?" "Rebellion?" President Arkin sneered. "They are nothing but children playing at politics. They will come crawling back when they realize their mistake." But not everyone in the room was so confident. A few of the smaller factions looked uneasy, their leaders whispering among themselves. They had seen something in Caldwell's eyes, something they hadn't expected, something they didn't understand. "Humanity may be younger than us, but they've grown far more powerful than we realized," one of the leaders from the Polarian system said quietly. "We can't afford to ignore them." The conversation grew heated as the debate continued, with some calling for immediate action, while others advocated for diplomatic measures. It was clear that humanity's bold move had changed everything. For the first time, Earth was standing on equal footing with the galaxy's most powerful factions, and that sent a ripple through the entire council. Back on Earth, the news of the walkout spread like wildfire. The human people were watching in awe as their ambassadors took a stand. Some celebrated, proud of their representatives' courage. Others, however, feared the consequences of such a bold move. In the bustling streets of New York, people gathered around news screens, their faces lit up by the glowing light of the broadcast. The camera cut to the human ambassador, who was addressing the people of Earth directly. "We are no longer your subordinates," Caldwell's voice rang out. "We will decide our future, and we will not bow to anyone. The galaxy may tremble at our actions, but we will stand tall. We are humanity, and we will not be silenced." The crowd erupted in cheers. There was a sense of pride, of unity, that had not been seen in humanity for centuries. But behind the cheers, there was also a growing sense of fear. What would the consequences of their actions be? Would the galaxy rise against them, or would they stand their ground? One thing was certain: humanity had taken the first step toward becoming something more than just a footnote in the galaxy's history. They had walked away from the peace talks and they had made their statement. Now the galaxy would have to decide what to do about it. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was eerily quiet after the human delegation had walked out. The leaders of the other species sat frozen, unsure of what to do next. Ambassador Caldwell had made his statement, but the shock of humanity's bold move hung heavy in the air. No one had expected Earth to challenge the very core of galactic politics. But now, that's exactly what had happened. President Arkin, the towering Aterian leader, slammed his fist onto the table. "This is an insult. We cannot allow such insolence," he roared, his deep voice echoing in the chamber, his green skin flushed with anger, his three eyes narrowing dangerously. "Calm down, Arkin," a quiet voice interrupted. It came from Veyara, the slender and wise leader of the Fenarans, a species known for their peacekeeping role in the galaxy. "This isn't the time for anger. This is unprecedented, but it is not the end of our power." Arkin clenched his jaw, his sharp teeth visible as he glared at Veyara. "Do you think this is some kind of game? We cannot let them simply walk away without consequences." "I agree," said Jor-El, a leader from the Qatar Confederacy. His voice was soft but full of authority. "But we also cannot afford to underestimate them. Humanity has demonstrated strength we didn't expect. Their actions may not be a simple bluff. We need to think carefully before we respond." Across the room, the leaders from the smaller species exchanged nervous glances. Some were whispering among themselves, wondering if this was the beginning of a shift in galactic power. Others were more fearful, uncertain whether humanity's move was a call for respect or a dangerous sign of rebellion. "I suggest we open communication with them immediately," Veyara continued, her tone calm but resolute. "We cannot simply let this fester. If they are serious, we need to understand what they want." "Understand what they want?" Arkin scoffed. "They walked out of our negotiations. We owe them nothing. We have given them everything they've asked for, and this is how they repay us?" "I will not argue with you on that, Arkin," said Jor-El, his voice quiet but firm. "But the truth is, Earth is no longer the weak species they once were. We all know it. Their technology is growing faster than we anticipated. If we push them too far, we may lose much more than a peace treaty." The room fell into an uneasy silence. The reality of the situation was sinking in. For decades, Earth had been the underdog. Their planets were still relatively new to galactic politics. But now, in a single move, they had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was very different. News outlets were broadcasting the story of the walkout, and people across the globe were captivated. The media portrayed the event as a bold and triumphant moment. As the footage of Caldwell walking out of the council chamber played on screens, viewers cheered. This was a new era for humanity, one where they no longer bent to the will of the galactic powers. In the streets of New York, in London, in Tokyo, there were crowds gathered around news stations, watching the same broadcast. People were celebrating, high-fiving, and even hugging strangers. The idea that humanity had stood up to the galaxy's strongest races filled them with pride. "This is just the beginning," one young man shouted, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Humanity is taking its place among the stars. In the White House, President Evelyn Jacobs stood at a podium addressing the people of Earth. "Today we took a stand," she said, her voice steady and confident. "No longer will we be told what to do. No longer will we be treated as inferior. We will decide our own fate. The galaxy will now know that humanity will not be silenced." The cheers that followed echoed through the halls, but there were also hushed conversations. Some questioned the wisdom of the move. What would the galactic powers do in response? Would they launch a full-scale attack on Earth? Would they isolate humanity from the rest of the galaxy? In the Galactic Council, however, the situation was far less certain. While President Arkin and others were furious, they knew they had to tread carefully. The last thing they wanted was to provoke Earth into a full-blown conflict. But could they allow this act of defiance to go unchallenged? "We cannot back down now," President Arkin finally declared, his voice cold and resolute. "We will not allow Earth to make a mockery of the Council, but we must be strategic. We cannot risk everything over this. We should offer them a new treaty," Vayara suggested, her voice calm but full of conviction. "A treaty that gives Earth more autonomy, while still maintaining the balance of power in the galaxy. This could be our opportunity to bring them back into the fold without a war." Arkin's eyes narrowed. "You think they'll accept a new treaty after this? You think they'll trust us again? They've walked away, Vayara. They've shown they don't need us." "I'm not saying it will be easy," Vayara replied, "but I believe it's our best chance. The alternative is to escalate, and that will lead us down a path we can't turn back from." There was a long silence as the leaders of the Galactic Council considered her words. Jor-El spoke up again, his voice filled with careful thought. "I agree with Vayara. We must not act in haste, but we also need to prepare for the worst. Humanity may be bold, but they are not invincible. If they want to play by their own rules, then we must be ready for whatever comes next." On Earth, however, the mood was more uncertain. While the public was overwhelmingly supportive of the walkout, the government knew the reality of the situation. They had just challenged the galaxy's most powerful races. If the Council decided to retaliate, humanity could be in danger. Ambassador Caldwell, back at Earth's embassy, was preparing for the next steps. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy," he said to his staff, "but we've opened a door. Now we need to decide if we're ready to walk through it." The pressure was mounting. The walkout had sent a shockwave through the galaxy, and humanity's future was now uncertain. But one thing was clear. Earth had chosen its path. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The news of humanity's bold walkout continued to reverberate throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council had never been this divided, and the chaos it caused rippled through every system. While some leaders pushed for immediate action, others questioned whether humanity's decision was truly a challenge or just a desperate cry for attention. On Earth, the mood was a mixture of pride, uncertainty, and fear. The streets were still buzzing with excitement, but in government buildings, quiet conversations were taking place behind closed doors. Humanity had made a statement, but no one knew exactly how the galaxy would respond. Earth's leadership understood that the walkout was just the beginning, but what came next was still unclear. President Evelyn Jacobs sat in her office, staring at a series of reports on her desk. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. A hollow screen flickered in front of her, displaying the faces of her top advisors. They were in a video call from across the globe, each with their own thoughts on the crisis. "I think it's clear, Madam President," said General Marcus Blake, the head of Earth's military. His expression was serious, his eyes narrowed in concern. "The Council will not let this go easily. We've challenged the status quo, and we can't expect them to just back down." Jacobs nodded slowly. "I know, Marcus, but we can't go back now. The people of Earth won't stand for it. We've come too far." "But they'll see us as a threat," Blake continued. "If we don't handle this carefully, we could provoke a war. The larger factions, the Aterians, the Katarians, the Polarian Union, they won't let a small race like us disrupt the balance of power. We need to prepare for the worst. I agree, said Ambassador Caldwell, who had returned to Earth after the walkout. But it's important we don't act out of fear. The Council doesn't understand humanity, and that's our advantage. We've shown them we won't be pushed around. Now we need to figure out how to handle the next phase. There was a long pause as the group considered Caldwell's words. Earth had gained attention, but at what cost? Humanity's future was now in the hands of its leaders, and every decision carried weight. I think we need to extend an olive branch, suggested Vayara, a galactic peace ambassador who had secretly contacted Earth. Offer a way for the Council to save face, while showing them that Earth won't settle for anything less than equality. This is about diplomacy, not war. We've tried diplomacy before, Blake countered, and it never worked. If we give them an inch, they'll take a mile. We have to show them we are not a race to be controlled. We need to show the galaxy that we are strong but not aggressive, Jacob said. She leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. Humanity can stand up for itself without starting a war. If we can get the Council to see that, we may still have a chance for peace. Back on the galactic stage, the reaction to Earth's decision was far from unanimous. While many of the smaller species looked on in awe at humanity's audacity, the larger powers were growing nervous. The Eterian, President Arkin, had called an emergency meeting of the Council to discuss what had happened. His anger was palpable, and he was not alone in his fury. The human delegation has disrespected us, Arkin shouted, his 3 eyes glowing with indignation. They walked out of our negotiations without any regard for the consequences. We cannot allow such behavior to go unpunished. There is no need for punishment, said Jorel of the Qatar Confederacy, his voice calm but firm. We are not dealing with rebels. We are dealing with a race that has just shown us its strength. We cannot ignore that. There are many who believe this is a sign of rebellion, Arkin argued. A sign that humanity wishes to dominate us. They have no place in our council unless they learn respect. Jorel's face softened. What if they don't want to dominate us? What if they simply want to be treated as equals? Arkin narrowed his eyes. They're not our equals, they're still too young, too weak. Perhaps, Vayara, the Fenaran leader, spoke up. But humanity is growing stronger every day. It might be worth negotiating a new agreement. One that takes their power into account without threatening our authority. The discussion continued for hours, with no clear consensus. The Eterians wanted action, while others wanted diplomacy. Some suggested that they send a fleet to Earth to remind humanity of their place in the galaxy, but others warned that such an action could push humanity even further away. Meanwhile, on Earth, the government continued to plan their next move. Ambassador Caldwell and his team worked tirelessly to craft a new proposal that would show strength without threatening war. They knew that the galaxy would not be satisfied with a simple apology, but they also knew that humanity's future depended on how they handled this moment. The key is to remain firm, Caldwell explained to Jacobs. We can't back down. But we also can't provoke them. We need a solution that shows we're here to stay, but we don't want to start a war. It's a delicate balance, Jacobs replied. But I trust you, Caldwell. You've always known how to navigate these tricky situations. Caldwell smiled, though his eyes were tired. Let's hope I still do. The human leaders knew that the coming days would be crucial. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see how humanity would respond. Would they continue down this path of defiance, or would they find a way to work with the other species? Either way, one thing was certain. Humanity had already changed the galaxy's view of them. They were no longer seen as weak or insignificant. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the days passed, the pressure continued to mount. The Galactic Council's next move was uncertain, and humanity's future hung in the balance. But Earth had already made its mark. The galaxy had seen the human resolve, and they would never forget it. The question now was whether the Council would bend to humanity's will, or whether they would choose to escalate the conflict. The next chapter of humanity's history was about to begin, and the entire galaxy was watching. The days following the walkout were filled with uncertainty and growing anxiety, both on Earth and across the galaxy. In every corner of the universe, leaders whispered about humanity's sudden and bold defiance. It was a challenge to the very fabric of the Galactic Council, and no one was sure how the situation would unfold. Back on Earth, President Evelyn Jacobs sat in her office, staring out at the skyline. It was a moment of quiet, but beneath the calm exterior, a storm was brewing. The decision they had made wasn't easy, but it had been necessary. Now, as the news continued to spread about Earth's walkout, Jacobs knew that humanity was standing at a crossroads. They had demanded respect, but at what cost? The communication lines were open, and the galactic leaders were preparing their responses. Earth had caught the attention of every power in the galaxy, and it was impossible to predict what would happen next. On Earth, the people's voices were louder than ever, filled with a mix of pride and uncertainty. There were celebrations in the streets, but there were also hushed conversations about what lay ahead. In the Capitol building, the human leaders gathered to discuss their next move. Ambassador Caldwell, who had been a key figure in the walkout, stood before the team, his face stern and focused. "The situation is escalating," he began. "We've made our stance clear, but the Council is not going to back down quietly. We are now in uncharted territory. The Eterians are pushing for immediate retaliation, and other factions are starting to question whether Earth can truly stand alone." President Jacobs nodded. "I knew this wouldn't be easy, but we have to stick to our principles. We've already shown the galaxy that we're not afraid to take action. Now we need to ensure we're prepared for what's coming next." General Blake, the head of Earth's military, spoke up. "We've strengthened our fleet, but we're still outnumbered. The Council is much larger than we are. If they decide to attack, it could get ugly very quickly." "But they haven't attacked yet," Caldwell countered. "They're hesitant. They don't know how far we're willing to go. We have to use that uncertainty to our advantage. We need to show them that we're not a threat, but we're not weak either." The debate continued, with each leader offering their opinions. The tension in the room was palpable. Humanity was at the edge of something monumental. No one knew if their actions would lead to peace or destruction, but the stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, President Archon of the Eterians stood at the head of the table, his anger still simmering. The entire council had been called into an emergency meeting. The news of humanity's defiance had sent shockwaves through the most powerful factions of the galaxy, and there was little agreement on how to respond. "We cannot let Earth challenge us like this," Archon said, his voice low but full of fury. "They must be made to understand their place. They have no right to defy the Galactic Council. But we also cannot afford to act impulsively." Vayara, the Finneran leader, responded calmly. "Humanity is growing stronger, and we must be careful not to push them too far. If we act with too much aggression, we risk a war that no one can win." "Their arrogance has gone too far," Archon shot back. "The Katarians, the Polarian Union, the Eterians, we control the galaxy. We've been the ruling powers for centuries. How dare Earth defy us?" Jarrell, the Katarian leader, leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, but Earth is no longer the weak species we once thought them to be. We all saw the reports. Their military technology is advancing at an alarming rate. They may not have the numbers, but they've shown that they're willing to fight for their place in this galaxy. Perhaps it's time we reconsider our approach." Archon's expression hardened. "What are you suggesting, Jarrell? That we back down? That we let them have whatever they want?" "I'm suggesting we don't make the same mistake we made with the Zorkians," Jarrell replied. "We underestimated their resolve, and look where that got us. Humanity is not like the others. They don't submit quietly, and they don't bend easily. If we force them into a corner, we could face far worse consequences than a war. We could face a galaxy-wide rebellion." The council room fell silent. For the first time, there was an understanding that humanity might not be the fragile, disorganized species they had once believed. The fear of a galaxy-wide rebellion was real. Some species might even support humanity, hoping to free themselves from the control of the larger powers. The balance of power was shifting. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, communication lines remained open. The smaller factions that had once been subservient to the larger powers were now watching Earth closely. Some were even reaching out, offering support. The question on everyone's mind was whether humanity would continue to hold its ground, or whether it would be forced to retreat. If Earth continued its defiance, it could inspire other races to follow suit, and the entire structure of the Galactic Council could collapse. Back on Earth, President Jacobs and her team were carefully considering their options. "We've made our position clear, but we need to prepare for the worst," she said. "We need to show the galaxy that we're not afraid to stand our ground, but we also need to be open to negotiation. We can't afford to push the Council too far, but we can't back down either." The team was still divided on the best course of action. Some argued that it was time to send a clear message to show that humanity was not afraid of the consequences. Others believed that a more diplomatic approach was the best way forward. "Whatever we choose, we have to do it soon," Caldwell said, his voice grim. "The galaxy is watching, and the Council is on the verge of making a decision. If we don't act quickly, we might not have a choice in what happens next." The growing fear was palpable. Humanity had made a bold move, but no one knew what the Council would do in response. The galaxy's balance of power was hanging by a thread, and humanity was at the center of it. As the days passed, the uncertainty only deepened. Would they be able to avoid war? Or had they already set in motion events that would change the course of the galaxy forever? The answer would come soon enough, but for now, humanity's fate was still uncertain. The days that followed were tense, and the air was thick with uncertainty. The Galactic Council continued to deliberate, caught between two opposing forces. Some advocated for swift retaliation against Earth, while others warned that such a response could push humanity into a position where they would never back down. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders, including President Jacobs and Ambassador Caldwell, spent every waking hour preparing for what could come next. Back on Earth, the media coverage was overwhelming. Every new update was met with a flurry of excitement and fear. The people of Earth were unsure of what the future held, but there was a shared sense of unity. Humanity had taken a stand, and it wasn't going to back down easily. As the days wore on, the sense of pride among the people grew, but so did the anxiety. Would the Council respond with force, or would they choose diplomacy? The Earth government's primary focus was to maintain the unity they had created. The military had been on high alert, and the newly expanded fleet was ready for whatever might come. But there was also a push for diplomacy. It was a delicate balance that the leadership had to maintain. They had to show strength, but avoid an outright conflict. As the pressure mounted, President Jacobs stood at her desk, reviewing a new message from the Galactic Council. "Madam President, the Council has agreed to an emergency meeting," Caldwell said, stepping into the room with the communication device in hand. "They want to negotiate. It seems the situation has reached a breaking point." Jacobs exhaled deeply. "So it's come to this. The Council is finally willing to talk. We've made our mark, but now it's time to see if we can keep the peace." Caldwell nodded. "We have to be careful, Madam President. The Council won't make this easy. If we don't approach this strategically, we could lose everything we've gained." "I understand," Jacobs replied, turning to face him. "Prepare the delegation. We'll go in with an open mind, but we won't compromise on our demands. We want to be treated as equals, not subordinates." The meeting was set to take place in a neutral zone, a massive station located in the middle of galactic space. It was designed for high-level negotiations and was considered a neutral ground where no species could gain an advantage. As the human delegation arrived, they were met by representatives from the Council's various factions. The tension in the room was palpable. The Eterians, the Polarian Union, and the Qatar Confederacy were all present, their eyes fixed on the humans. This was it, the moment that would decide the future of humanity. President Arkan of the Eterians was the first to speak. "Humanity, you have overstepped your bounds. You walked away from our negotiations, and now you will learn what happens when you defy the Galactic Council." Caldwell stood tall, his eyes steady. We did not walk away out of disrespect. We walked away because we were not being treated as equals. For too long, Earth has been forced to accept terms that were not in our favor. We are here today to negotiate, but we will not accept anything less than full equality. Arkin's eyes narrowed. You speak of equality, but you forget your place. The Council has protected you for years. We have given you the opportunity to expand, to join the galaxy. And this is how you repay us? You gave us protection, Caldwell replied. But that protection came with conditions that held us back. We are not asking for your mercy. We are asking for a seat at the table just like everyone else. Veyara, the Fenaran leader, spoke up. Perhaps we are all to blame for not recognizing humanity's potential sooner. But I agree with the human ambassador. We have to approach this from a place of understanding. If we continue to treat humanity as an inferior race, we risk alienating them and perhaps others who may one day join us. President Arkin snorted. We should have dealt with them when they first made their move. Now it's too late. Jor-El of the Qatar Confederacy raised his hand, calling for attention. Enough, Arkin. We are here to talk, not to fight. Humanity has shown us that they will not bend, and we must respect that. If we continue to push them, we risk more than just rebellion. We risk losing them as an ally altogether. The Council room fell into a tense silence. The weight of the decision was clear. The galaxy had never seen a species as determined as humanity, and there was a growing sense that they were no longer a threat to be crushed, but a power to be respected. The question was not whether the Council could defeat them. The question was whether the Council could afford to do so. After a long pause, Veyara spoke again. We must offer humanity a new agreement, one that reflects their strength and their potential. We cannot ignore the fact that they are not the same race we once knew. Their technology, their resolve, everything about them is changing. We need to accept that. Arkin slammed his fist on the table. And what, you think they'll just sit at the table and accept our terms? They will never accept the Council as it stands. If we show weakness, they will take advantage of us. We are not showing weakness, Jor-El said, his tone firm. We are showing wisdom. We must adapt, or we will lose the respect of every species in this galaxy. The debate continued for hours, but a shift had occurred. The Council was beginning to understand the reality of the situation. Humanity had grown too strong to be ignored or controlled. The negotiations that followed were unlike any the Council had ever held. The terms were hard-fought, and the humans did not back down. They were firm in their demands for equality, and in the end, the Council realized that their only option was to compromise. As the meeting came to a close, President Jacobs stood and addressed the Council. We came here today not to demand more power, but to demand respect. Earth will no longer be a footnote in galactic history. We will be a part of this galaxy, just as any other race is. The Council members exchanged glances, some with reluctance, others with reluctant acceptance. Humanity had made its mark, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The treaty was signed that day, not as a symbol of victory for one side, but as a new beginning for all. Humanity had shown that they were not just a small planet in a vast galaxy. They were now a force to be reckoned with, and the other species could no longer ignore them. As the human delegation returned to Earth, the mood was one of cautious optimism. The journey had been long and hard, but humanity had made its place in the galaxy. They had faced down the giants, and they had won, not through force, but through sheer determination and resolve. And so, humanity's journey was just beginning. The galaxy, once a place of distant and uncertain possibilities, was now an arena where Earth would play an important role. The future was unclear, but one thing was certain: humanity had earned its seat at the table.